Today I'm having a look at Yamaha's XVS650 or V-Star 650 Custom. The Custom stands out because it's got the nice sporty front guard and tail on it, and it's also blacked out in comparison to the Classic, which is the XVS650A. Really cool machine, a great starter cruiser. So this is a Lambs category motorcycle, so obviously there's some limitations on the power as far as what it's allowed to be as a Lambs machine. Still a V-twin, it's got some nice chrome on it, it's got really cool spoked wheels. It does take tubed tyres and it doesn't have ABS, just as things to keep in mind. But overall, it looks the business, it's a fun thing to ride. Again, for a Lambs machine, and being a 650 instead of say a 250, you're gonna get a lot more rideability and learning potential out of this particular machine. 250 is probably gonna be an easier place to start, but at the end of the day, on something like this, you'll get more out of it in the long run, especially here in Australia where you spend 3 years learning to ride and 3 years on a machine like this. At 250, you'll probably reach the limits after a year or two. This should hopefully take you through that whole period. And of course, when you get to the end of those 3 years, you'll be really ready for an even bigger cruiser. So there's only a 40 cubic inch, obviously, and there's about 40 horsepower on offer and 37.5 foot-pounds of torque as well, which isn't bad in normal terms, but in cruiser terms, that's not that much torque. Still a great fun machine to ride though, a great all-rounder. I've ridden it in the wet and the dry. It's just starting to rain now, of course. And I have to say, confident, inspiring in all conditions. And I think any new rider who jumped on one of these machines, as I said, might be a little bit harder to get started on compared to say a 250 option. It's still got a nice low seat height, 695 mils off the ground, so reach the ground very, very easy, like really easy, really low. Nice low center of gravity. It is a relatively heavy bike, but at the same time you don't really feel that weight once you're moving, so that's less of a concern. And it's just a really, really ideal option to jump on. They're also, I believe, about 8.8 plus on-road costs. So this is a premium Lambs cruiser, so it's right up the top of the Lambs cruisers available. And I think it does really offer a lot for that new rider who is definitely after a cruiser. So let's have a look at how it stacks up out on the road. All right, I'm out and about, morning commute on Yamaha's V-Star 650 or XVS650 as it's also called. Just done a highway stint, handles that very well. It's happy to cruise at 120 kilometers an hour indicated, which I would say is more, well, it's closer to 110 judging by the general flow of the traffic, which I was sticking with. It does have plenty more power from there for overtaking, but obviously this is a Lambs machine and outright power is not, or outright torque because it's a cruiser, is not the main concern. I did find, obviously with this style bike, there's quite a bit of wind resistance across your chest. I'm finding it a little bit on my feet, not too much of a concern though. Was just a little bit of pressure on my arms just because I was holding on just a tiny bit. With all that said, it's a very capable highway machine for somebody looking to do the Ks on one of these, perhaps commuting or doing some slightly longer trips. Obviously not a tourer, but I think it would handle everything. The suspension's also reasonably plush for me at about 70 kilos. So that also bodes well for people doing longer distances in that same kind of weight bracket. They're really big sharp bumps, you really do feel on this, even though the suspension's kind of a nice all-round, well-rounded system. The rear doesn't cope so well with those sharp bumps, but it is what it is. Very relaxed seating position, of course, being a cruiser. 5-speed gearbox, you don't normally notice that except on the freeway where you'll sometimes find yourself looking for another gear. You just rev out fifth a fair bit more, it's not really a concern, but coming from other bikes with the extra gear, it's something that you might find yourself looking for. Probably not as a new rider. There was some little vibrations through the bars once you get up to about that 120 indicated, where you get high enough in the revs in the lower gears. And also worth noting that it does track a little along road inconsistencies. All very manageable, but this bike does take quite a lot of bar input for line corrections and slower speed, more suburban riding. As you can see, once you get out onto this kind of nice road, you're not turning the bars, you're just leaning a little bit. However, you will find that at slower speeds you are putting a fair bit more bar input in, and when you do get that tracking, it actually transfers back from the front through the bars, which can feel a little bit unusual, and will probably feel a little bit unusual for new riders, but something to easily cope with. Like I said, very, very controlled. The bike itself, it's a fun thing to ride. I have to say, I have not yet actually hit the ground clearance limits. I do tend to lean off the bike a little bit more and keep the bike more upright, so that obviously offsets that. But I've been really impressed that I can pretty much ride it normally, as I would most bikes, through a lot of the usual twisties that we test on, or that I frequent. And I don't actually feel like I'm on one of these big, heavy cruisers where the minute you start to turn a corner, you've got floorboards touching down. On this, I haven't noticed it at all. Obviously, the pace is a little bit more restrained than on a sports bike. However, there's still plenty of torque to have some fun. It's great for cruising. I actually jumped on this bike from Yamaha's Nikon, and my first impression was essentially there's no power, there's not really any brakes, and handled alright. But the thing was, jumping from something with, 100 horsepower onto a much older school cruiser took me a little while to get used to it, because there's actually really, really nice torque from this V-twin power plant. The brakes actually do a good job. There's a lot more power in the rear, so you do use that a lot more. Obviously that's the opposite of what they tell you on a sports or naked bike, where you mainly use front brake. On this cruiser, obviously in wet and slippery conditions you want to balance those brakes well, but a lot of your braking power is in the rear. It's a very, very basic motorcycle in some ways. As I mentioned, obviously carbied. It's got a choke, something that you'll probably at times find irritating. There's no fuel gauge. I would have liked a fuel light, even though there's a reserve switch with a fuel tap. But naturally, because it's got that trip meter, you'll figure out how far you can get, and then you just keep an eye on that. It does seem to have quite a reasonable sized tank in it, and so far, filling it up with fuel. I filled it up a couple of times after doing about 100 Ks, and I've only put in say 5 litres or 4 litres. So fuel economy seems quite good as well, maybe between 20 and 25 kilometres per litre. I'll have to check the specs to see just how big the tank is. It feels quite large, but when you pull that tank cap off, there's obviously a fair bit of stuff in there. The full actual tank capacity isn't used. As far as the ride itself, it's a great fun thing to ride for a cruiser. Definitely for a new rider with that low seat height. It's got a nice smooth gearbox, very easy engagement. The foot controls work really, really well. The clutch pull is on the heavier side, but it's not too much of a concern, because you can really lug it in the gears. You can just kind of roll around in second gear. You can pretty much start from second gear as well. It's not a drama. And it'll just pull. Not like some bikes where they're quite easy to stall.
that's another positive. And I think, again, probably the biggest thing I take out of this is it's exceeded my expectations. It's like the Harley Street 500. There's a lot of things that are really different about it, but it's still a really great platform for a new motorcycle rider.
If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit that notification bell, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. Have you ridden one of these bikes? Did you start on one? Is there something else that you had in mind for a beginning cruiser? Let us know, and we'll be back soon. Thank you.